All right, welcome back. We're going to continue with more news and updates here on the show. Just looking at the state of universities, where universities mirror our nation. It's brilliant, resilient, but it's also deeply fractured. And so today we're shining a spotlight on South Africa's higher education landscape. Institutions that, of course, once nurtured the intellectual heart of our democracy, but now reflects the cracks of it too. From corruption, inequality, to campus violence, there's disillusionment as well, just the overall loss of trust. The challenges are mounting, but so too are stories of resilience and transformation and hope. And so the question is, what really lies behind this chaos? If our universities are the future, then what future are we building? To help us unpack these questions and more, we're going to be joined by political analyst Dale McKinley. Dale, good morning, and thank you for your time with us here on the SABC at this hour.
Good morning, Liesl, and to your listeners and viewers as well. Always a pleasure.
I know that there's a lot to get through, so let's see how we can make sense of what's transpired, right? So over 30 years into our democracy, there's issues of governance, capture of institutions that have come to the fore. Some are asking who are really running these institutions, these universities as well. If we're tracing shadow networks, corruption, political patronage, VCs who've become targets of academia battlegrounds, the leadership vacuums. Questions. How would you weigh in on that area of concern at this point as well?
Yeah, well, those are a lot of issues that you raise in that context. But I think at the heart of it is the fact that, if we talk about public universities here, and I'm not talking about the private sector necessarily, but public universities, for me, the fundamental problem, and it's not just a South African problem, but it's a global problem, is that universities have become corporatized. They've become businesses. They've become entities which are basically run like private sector corporations. And what that means oftentimes is, as a result of the lack of public funding, universities are having to seek other means of funding, squeezing students, cutting back on a whole range of infrastructural projects, on safety projects, on making sure that there's an adequate staff. So all of these on housing issues, and of course the issues of loans from NSFAS, as well as the general state of our economy. If you take all of those kinds of things together, what you have is a perfect storm where universities become sort of petri dishes of all the things that are happening in our society, and students are getting squeezed in the middle of those things, and that creates conflict. It creates factionalism. It creates patronage. It creates all of the kinds of things that we've seen at the governance levels at the state. And so in some ways, universities are mirrors of those state kinds of failures and challenges. And we see them in a more concentrated form on university campuses. That's not to say everything is bad. It's not to say all of it is negative. But I think we're facing a situation where we have a crisis of public education. And at the heart of that public crisis, which then spreads out into a whole range of different components, is the issue of taking public education seriously as something that is a public good as opposed to a private privilege.
Well, Dale, to your point, the autonomy of universities are being questioned, and if they are being corporatized, we're looking at the impact this has had, because the issue of financial strain and inequality, given our own social fabric, also comes to the fore, and the missing middle that is still missing. We know there are students who don't qualify for NSFAS, but they can't afford fees as well. And so the support on offer on that front, the mismanagement of NSFAS fees, the cost of trust as well, when it comes to maladministration, it is compounding the issues as well.
Yes, for sure. I mean, at the heart of this is money issues. Let's be clear. Because when we start, let's go back to Fees Must Fall.
Yeah.
At the beginning of 2014-15. At the heart of that is precisely what I'm talking about. And of course, there was more. There was about outsourcing of workers and the conditions of residences and a whole range of other things. But the heart of that is this issue that I'm talking about, which is basically public financing. And what we've had essentially, if you look at the way Model C schools at the secondary school level have developed, to me it's exactly what I call backdoor privatization. So effectively, when you start pulling public funds and you say to universities that you must take care of all of these other gaps, what then happens is those universities which have alumni and which have donors and which have fairly wealthy sort of foundations are able to fill some of those gaps. And others are not. So then you have greater inequalities. which of course is what we've seen historically in our country with regards to former mostly English-speaking and mostly white universities, and those that were from the homeland, so to speak, at the pre-1994 level. And all of this then basically comes together to create situations on campuses where it's much, much more easier, for example, for people with corrupt agendas to basically capture certain sections of budgets and we've seen that at University of Fort Hare, and become involved in the party politics and the provincial politics that is being played out. We've seen this at the University of Limpopo. We've seen it in KZN as well. So all of these kinds of things come together, and then they radiate out into a series of crises on the campus. We're going to, I'm sure, talk about safety and security issues as well, which have been of huge concern over the last many years. And I think that's where the debate has oftentimes fallen, is that we continue to think that it's simply a question of, putting the right people in the right place at universities, but it's a fundamental commitment to public institutions and public goods and public education that is at the heart of this crisis, in my opinion.
Well, Dale, let's get further into that. Yes, campuses, we've seen over the years, it's become ideological battlegrounds. So constructs of race, power, gender, these ideas are starting to turn violent, and obviously there's a price to be paid. And so with the issue of safety, violence, campus culture, campuses now being militarized because you've got security companies, you've got police presence, the normalization of forces, all this is playing out. I mean, just this week we saw an incident at Fort Hare University. Prior to that, Walter Sisulu University with the shooting of students as well. How safety then collapses in spaces meant to nurture learning is rather concerning.
Yeah, I think it's more than concerning. I was looking at some of the statistics of the last several years of violence on campuses, and it was quite astounding if you think of it. And we can oftentimes consider universities as safe places, at least mostly. I think 25% of all females over the last 5 years have reported that they've been sexually victimized at universities. That's a quarter of all female students. We've had 17 murders. During 2024, there were 17 different murders on university campuses of varying sorts. So yes, again, let's try to unpack this just a bit in terms of where the problem comes from. In normal circumstances at a public university, what you would have is you have a university security itself. In other words, public employees that are employed by the university, and that is their job, to look after security on the campuses. These have been basically hollowed out for the most part on most campuses. They don't exist in any meaningful way because the budgets and the commitment have been taken away. What then happens? Universities outsource security. They hire private security companies to try to fill the gap, which is exactly what we've seen with the state with regards to, private security companies guarding police stations, for example, because the police themselves don't have the capacity to protect their own personnel. So what that then happens is that becomes very selective. What gets protected and who gets protected on university campuses. Yep. That's one element of it institutionally and financially. The other element, of course, of that is that if we're having a culture, generally speaking, where gender-based violence in particular is not taken seriously and is not seen to be taken up by the justice system and by the institutions very seriously, then we've got a problem. And universities, again, are mirrors of this oftentimes, where university bureaucracies don't take gender-based violence as seriously as they should. They don't issue a whole range of, constant warnings and putting in place educational perspectives for students to be able to deal with these kinds of issues, and to pay counseling and psychosocial support, oftentimes for victims. All of these things come together to create an environment where I think many women in particular feel very vulnerable on university campuses. And that's what we've seen. This is beside the violence that then takes place as a result of political or financial or fights over budgets and students being very angry with a range of different things on campus. That's another story. But safety and security itself has to be something that is taken seriously by university itself, and it had the resources, both human and financial, to deal with that. When that gets taken away, we have the problems. So
Dale, where to from here? If we're reimagining what higher education spaces is going to be looking like, particularly as we evolve into this fourth industrial revolution, and we're seeing the growth, the trajectory of AI as well, but even just mental health costs, the psychosocial, the human health costs that it's come at the expense of perhaps the unfinished business of transformation at large. How do we begin to navigate this terrain?
Well, look, there's no silver bullet here in terms of just a simple answer to that question, but I think it starts with a recommitment to public universities, to public education. This is at the heart of any society that wants to develop in an inclusive way, in an equitable way, all the things that we have in our Constitution, all the good components of what we're trying to create as a society revolve around a good public education system. And of course, we know that the public education system and the inequalities and the racialization were at the heart of the problems that we inherited from apartheid. And there's been quite a lot of progress, obviously, on that front in terms of trying to equalize those opportunities and open up the universities, particularly to those from the working class and the poor. But at the same time, what we have not done, and I think what the government has fundamentally failed to do, and here's the fundamental critique, is that as a result of basically not putting public goods at the heart of the developmental agenda, at the heart of that's what they've left universities to their own. Autonomy becomes basically you're on your own. You've got to fill these gaps. We can only help you to a certain extent. And what that does is that then brings to the surface all of those historical cleavages, all of those historical divisions, and all those fundamental problems that we have. So I think at the heart of it is a financial and political commitment to public education. It's not an easy road, but it's a road that we have to return to in order to solve these kinds of problems.
Dale, thank you for your time and for weighing in. There's concerns about security, governance, integrity at large. Let's see how we navigate it from here into. Dale McKinley, of course, a political analyst, weighing in on the future of higher education. What future are we building given the current realities? Again, thank you for his time.